So, welcome to How the Employee Journey Drives CX. I'm Neil Ray, CEO of the Customer Management Hub, and I'll be joined today by my colleague Stephen Gosnell, who's our CX Consultancy Director. Today, we're going to talk about the role of employees and how, through a variety of routes, they can have a major impact on CX. We will cover the best ways to achieve this, including mapping the employee journey and how to realize employee creativity via empowerment. Throughout the talk, we will emphasize the importance of working in a controlled environment to minimize risk and ensure wherever possible proven financial benefits. I'll set the scene with some key examples and Steve will detail the techniques we have used to achieve success. Throughout the presentation, we're going to illustrate our points with stories of empowered employees who have really changed the customer journey for the better within their organizations. I'd like to start with the story of Kay, who I met at an event that Steve and I co-presented at, which Virgin Trains were speaking at. Kay is part of the station platform team at London Euston Railway Terminus, and she spends her days helping customers with their travel questions. As such, she's in the perfect position to actually observe the announcement board anxiety that is a particular feature of Euston. The platform is often only announced around 20 minutes before the train is due to depart, and given the large number of people and luggage that need to board the train and the limited seating at peak hours, this can actually lead to high levels of anxiety, particularly among some groups who don't have seats reserved or have a lot of luggage, might have mobility problems, might have young children, or possibly be older people. Journeys from London Euston can actually take 4 or more hours as trains travel all the way to Scotland in some cases. So people don't want to have to stand or sit in corridors. This leads to platform rush as everybody tries to funnel onto the platform and people get a lot less civilized trying to get to the right seat on the train, believe me. Kay's idea was to offer a pre-boarding service to particular groups, such as those I just mentioned, and this delivered a significant customer benefit to an anxious group that otherwise might well have sought alternative routes. The service has grown significantly since it was introduced, although you won't see it advertised, as it actually offered by the platform staff on the ground rather than being pre-booked. Crucially, the environment was right for Kay to voice and enact her initiative with full management backing of Virgin Trains. So, why is it so important to empower employees to drive improved CX? Well, there's a lot of evidence that employees are disengaged worldwide. And there's a lack of enthusiasm, which is costing companies competitive advantage. Just to look at these stats, Gallup state that 87% of employees worldwide are not engaged at work. They also say that companies with highly engaged workforces outperform their peers by 147% in earnings per share. Disruptors in digital in particular are redefining customer experiences, making them easier and more customer-centric. At the same time, prices are being driven down across the market by digital offerings. This is becoming more challenging for traditional players to compete in. And the result is cost cutting, automation of processes, which can lead to disempowerment and ultimately to staff turnover as people leave. Organizations need to value their people, ultimately because they're the ones that deliver great customer experiences, and frontline staff in particular are a key emotional touch point for customers, and they can often make all the difference to purchase, retention, and upsell in the future. The final stat I draw upon actually comes from Qualtrics at a seminar they did recently, where a third of B2B relationships are abandoned as not being personal enough. Altogether, this is a call to action that organisations need to work harder at motivating employees if they are to differentiate themselves in an increasingly competitive world. Understanding employee experience to improve customer experiences is just a part of discipline of holistic CX. Delivering great customer experiences involves the whole organisation. Decisions in many areas enhance or detract from this. Today, we're going to focus on the importance of employees in delivering great CX. We're going to briefly cover why other areas are also key. Brand experience is important as it covers the top of funnel view of what the broader market sees of your service or products, and this is clearly crucial to the future of your business. The experience of existing customers has overtaken the impact of brand communication in many areas as prospects look to review sites to understand which brand to pick. A great campaign can no longer make up for really poor execution, and successful brands have to deliver great experiences that are consistent with the brand promise. Great brands need to constantly innovate to stay ahead of the competition, but that innovation must be driven by customer understanding as well as creativity. The silos that businesses create to drive excellence in each area often block the coordinated approach that is required to win the race. Rivalries prevent the dissemination of information or the acceptance of useful customer insights, or sometimes information is simply not communicated well and is misunderstood. The bridge between customer and employee experience is the most important to get right, as a motivated team can overcome many of the obstacles that are put in the way. The key to achieving this is a consistent and compelling vision of what the customer experience needs that can be understood by everyone in the organization. Once this is agreed and communicated, the business can build its CX strategy around it to ensure that every part of the organization has the right systems and tools to deliver on the vision. So we're not saying this is easy, but look, to compete with the focused, agile and driven digital disruptors, our experience tells us companies need a more holistic strategy. So where do we start to build the bridge from EX to CX? Well, firstly, by listening to CX insights and employees through the voice of the employee, then by sharing and acting on this voice of the employee, and finally, by motivating and empowering employees to innovate and ultimately solve the problems for themselves. So let's start with employees listening to what customers and others around them are saying about the customer experience. There are many ways to listen. The classic annual employee engagement survey is less well suited to customer-related insights. We actually recommend more regular and focused feedback mechanisms, looking at how to improve the customer journey. Face-to-face town halls give the energy and emotional engagement to the feedback and can also actually be helpful for forming consensus. The key is to deliver change to show that the organisation is listening and willing to act. Without this engagement, these initiatives can and will fail. Structures also often get in the way of these initiatives. They're exacerbated by the size of the organisation, the type of silos and hierarchies that exist. As a result, mechanisms need to be designed to negate these barriers. One of the best examples of listening posts that we came across is Waitrose, a UK food retailer, which has a program to gather great ideas from all their staff called the Partner Ideas Platform. An example of feedback provided and action taken was when a checkout staff member had the idea of removing 12 centimetres from the receipt length as blank space and some printed information was not needed. She took the time to write out the exact changes that she recommended. This saved money for the company, around £168,000 a year just in consumables. But it also saved time for the consumers waiting at the tills and actually made the receipts easier for customers to work with. Key to these initiatives is that they need to be well supported by the business in terms of finance, but also in terms of people's time and the need to reward employees with recognition and a thank you for doing the work. The Waitrose example shows how listening posts empower employees to improve the CX. For this to be successful, the mechanism used needs to be open and empathetic to the employee's position, particularly if the history of the organisation has been more closed. An extreme example of this is a milk and groceries delivery company in the UK. This organisation was struggling against increased competition from the likes of Ocado and had a particularly authoritarian management structure that was uninterested in the view of its frontline staff, which it treated like children. As the drivers were loading the trucks, you could really taste the cynicism in the air as they openly mocked managers. Management, on the other hand, held weekly meetings where they yelled at the staff about what they'd done wrong. So trying to create great customer experiences from this foundation was clearly going to make little headway. The change came when the meeting shifted to a manager simply asking the question, "How can I help you to create better customer service?" and then listening to what the frontline staff had to say. Initially, there was not much feedback, but one person said, "You're always yelling at us and get our whites dirty." They deliver in all white uniforms. "But then you make us load the vans wearing them. Why don't you let us wear aprons or not wear our whites when loading the vans?" So the management thought about this, and they got some aprons, and the staff saw that they were being listened to. Next week, someone suggested that their early morning delivery times could actually become a key selling point by offering things that would appeal to parents sending their kids off to school for their lunches. This actually proved highly successful, and the suggestions kept coming. By drawing on the insights of these key people who had never previously been listened to, the company began to turn around and deliver what its customers really needed, based on the creativity of its customer-facing staff. A very strong story of how frontline staff are being empowered to deliver real change that has big customer benefits is T-Mobile in the US. John Legere is the highly charismatic CEO of T-Mobile US, and over the last 6 years, he has transformed it from an undifferentiated second-tier mobile operator into a major player that's challenging for the top spot against Verizon and AT&T. He understood what people hated about mobile operators, and one by one he changed T-Mobile's offer to remove these barriers. Most famously, this started with the removal of 2-year contracts, but extended to the removal of roaming fees and many other irritants in the customer experience. From the start, he spent many hours listening to customer calls into the contact center to understand the role this played in the customer experience, and he didn't like what he was listening to. John Legere is a great believer in empowering the front line and has a poster on the wall outside his office actually saying "front line first" to make it clear where he stands. In recent years, T-Mobile began testing a new concept in contact center management, and that reversed many years of people management thinking in the space. This model came to fruition in 2018 with the launch of the program nationwide, trailed with the following advert.
We changed wireless for good with one guiding belief.
We put our customers at the forefront of every experience.
And where our competitors see numbers,
we see people.
We put them first.
We treat them right.
We're constantly changing the rules of an entire industry in their favor. We're the people who do it best. We are customer service experts.
We are customer obsessed.
We're here for a career serving customers, not just a job. And where other companies offer their people incentives to get off the phone, T-Mobile's dedicated experts are empowered to solve a problem on the first try.
To truly listen.
Call,
message,
or tell us when to contact you.
We're here to serve and to solve. We are your team of experts. Because real customer service takes real people.
Apologies for those in the US who may have seen this advert a lot. Elsewhere, this example is not so well known, but really it should be. So T-Mobile are making it clear that they want to redefine the mobile customer experience. So what's going on behind the scenes to help them deliver this? Well, the backdrop is digitization of contact centers. Huge volumes of customers are shifting to self-serve and chat away from telephone. The result is greater complexity and sometimes greater concentration of angry customers escalated to the phone. So what are the key principles of T-Mobile's transformation? Well, the first is collaborative working. The contact center staff were moved from large teams focused on specialisms such as onboarding to smaller teams focused on geographical areas with a defined customer base. This is a big shift away from industry norms. People were trained to become generalists with a broad knowledge so that they could solve a much wider range of problems and in most cases manage a customer call without referral to an expert. These teams became known as teams of experts or TEXs, and their environments were changed to encourage collaboration. They were given meeting spaces for regular catch-ups to discuss common issues and come up with solutions. The next area is customer closeness. By focusing on a distinct geographical area, staff are encouraged to keep up to date with local news and issues that could impact service and given time to do so. In a recent case, the team was able to provide clear guidance on when service would be resumed following wildfires in that area that had destroyed a number of base stations for transmitting and receiving mobile signals. Then we have customer focus. Because they're working with a defined group of customers, they're able to give out their direct contact details, so the customer can, whenever possible, return to the same agent to resolve a problem, something which is pretty unheard of in this industry. This encourages agents to, where possible, resolve the customer's problem first time, and if not, to do so as quickly as possible. And finally, financial accountability. Each team has its own P&L, and this encourages them to maximize customer satisfaction and retention, as well as the scale of services that customers sign up for. So what's the impact? Well, as we can see here, the cost to serve down 13%, a 21% reduction in calls per account. Apology credits down 37%, NPS up by more than 50%, customer churn rate at an all-time low, staff attrition from 42% down to 20%, and absenteeism down 24%. T-Mobile is now the number one for wireless provider for the past 24 months, according to Nielsen. And it's an impressive set of outcomes, and all of this was achieved by retraining existing staff rather than recruiting large numbers of new staff. Some didn't want to make the transition, and that's kind of fair enough, but most actually did, and they stayed. So what are the tools that you need to use to understand your employees and customers well enough to bring about this kind of change? Steve?
Thanks, Neil. We've heard from Neil about the benefits that can flow from building that bridge between the employee and customer experience. And there are a whole host of tools and activities to launch and sustain this active involvement of employees in the customer cause. I'm going to talk about this wider toolkit, come on to talk about it in a moment. Wanted to say more recently in our client work, we found that investing in deep dive employee journey mapping is one of the most powerful ways to accelerate a successful CX strategy. Yeah, your common sense will tell you that employee involvement is basic to driving effective CX improvement. The employee and customer perspectives are two sides of the same coin. And yet I've seen many CX investments where you do the work, you build great customer insights, but then you hit a brick wall, and a brick wall in terms of converting that into concrete business improvements and delivery plans. Far less common than customer journey mapping, employee journey mapping provides fresh insight on the customer experience. And really importantly, something I really want to emphasize, it takes you into the whole ecosystem of the organization, putting the spotlight on delivery gaps and barriers, and things like inter-team relationships, where the baton might be dropped in service, where energy levels fall, or where technology struggles to support. So this results in a much more holistic view on precisely how to deliver CX improvement. Any CX work worth its salt will always include some level of employee consultation, or some employee listening posts, you might call them. But usually that doesn't go far enough. Employee journey mapping sets out to understand employee experiences and emotions with more rigor and more systematically. One simple story, I think, which nicely brings home the power of this integrated mapping approach, deals with an unexpected moment of truth that was discovered for a pharmaceutical client reviewing their vaccine business. This was, imagine the very literal pain point for patients when they receive their vaccine injection. And I, for one, I'm always told I go very pale and am tense when I see a needle coming my way. Actually, after spending time with the teams administering the vaccines, it turned out to be more complicated than it first seems, this pain point. In fact, it was found that it was also a pain point for the nurse, and the reason was that they were often hiding tensions of their own. So let's dig a bit more on this. What was discovered was that nurses working into fairly hectic schedules weren't always 100% confident that they were matching the right vaccines with the right person. One important cause of this was that there was just simply so many different vaccines to choose from, and some of them weren't easy to identify. And this actually came down mainly due to something as obvious, seemingly obvious, as tiny labels on the vials containing the vaccines. This type of insight has really important implications. First and foremost, the very slight but extremely serious risk of administering the wrong vaccine. And then two anxious individuals is never going to be a good thing, especially in a patient-nurse relationship. From a business perspective, though, a pharma company with such labelling will also risk selling less if the competition is providing clearer labelling. So, building on all this and recognising its importance, the company was able to review the whole process, and a key part of this process became having easy-to-read, preloaded syringes, which nurses can just grab and use. It does remain a nice illustration for me of how important it is to get the employee perspective. Employee mapping, and we'll come on to say more about it, can serve multiple objectives, including, say, even thinking about your employee value proposition. But where we're coming from, our particular success and use cases are about harnessing employee journey mapping to drive improved CX. And the work will often be tightly defined, addressing particular teams and service issues to solve. For example, in the case of some work I did with an airline, the moment we went to work on was everything around the teams and technology involved in the critical moment of boarding and the aircraft door close, as it's called. Let's now look at a couple more examples to illustrate what employee journey mapping can achieve for the customer experience. I'm sure with our interest in CX, we've all heard about the work of the Disney Institute. They put so much focus on building that bridge between their employees, or rather cast members, and customers. And they talk a lot about engaging and empowering their teams around central customer purpose, the importance of that, in their case, creating happiness through entertainment. They've shared lots of examples over the years, how they've identified customer moments of truth and then worked to create systematic approaches to deliver the right outcomes. They're also famous for emphasizing how the insights and ideas come from listening to employees. Most of us may well have heard the story of the most common question at Disney, and competing for the top spot there, it's the question from customers: what time does the 3 o'clock parade go by? The interesting point here is what's the real question, and what the visitors really mean when they're saying this. And the question behind the question is, where should I stand to see the 3 o'clock parade go by? Now, with that insight, using that insight, cast members carry a detailed time schedule of the planned progress of the parade. What location, what time, and it even includes details down to the position of the sun, location of restrooms, location of drinks vendors. So with that, cast members are able to identify the spot that will be in the shade, the time to get there to secure the view. And as a result of all this, not only do customers really feel looked after, but they get the first perfect shot for the mantelpiece. Disney respond perfectly well to functional questions, but they're very smart at developing this X-ray vision. Here they've homed in on the apparently silly question about the parade and created the opportunity for a lasting memory around a moment of truth. And when Disney are training on this kind of thing to other organizations, they often credit their own cast members for identifying the hidden question or the customer need. And then helping to build that system or playbook, as we like to call it, to ensure that the employee is supported in delivering this outcome. And this is where the combination of the employee and customer approach is most powerful. Combining the customer and employee insight is far more likely to lead to sustainable solutions. So to briefly summarize some of the benefits, as we've been highlighting, above all, employee journey mapping provides critical input for removing internal barriers to customer centricity and ultimately building those playbooks we've been talking about for delivering sustainable CX solutions. I also wanted to flag up that it acts as a reservoir of integrated insight for future activation. So many of our clients also value the mapping as a resource to draw on, a gift that carries on giving. Employee journey mapping is also an impressive consultation exercise. approached in the right way and communicated widely and openly across the organization, it becomes a great talking point and demonstration of a one-team collaborative culture. Complementing the employee journey mapping, there's also a whole range of practices for then sustaining this customer-driven mindset and the behaviors. And I'm going to touch on not the whole list, but a couple of the ones that you can see up there particularly. We've already covered the benefits of a properly integrated employee and customer mapping approach. Then, of course, there's the whole world of voice of customer feedback management and closing the loop, the engine room of CX, and where the likes of the Qualtrics platforms and solutions deliver so much value. They do this by ensuring employees right across the business have their finger on the customer pulse and enabling the business to nip emerging issues in the bud. And personally, I'll not forget my first encounters with this type of approach in the automotive sector, where once they had in place a healthy feedback loop culture, just how impressive it was to see the focus and motivation this created. Employees in car dealerships at the beginning of each day, when they gathered and reviewed the feedback which they needed to go to work on. Running in parallel to this, I wanted to also draw attention to the area of voice of employee feedback and something we call mirror metrics. Here it's also important to consider expanding typical employee engagement work to specifically seek their feedback on CX delivery. We refer to these as mirror metrics, as the idea is it's all about providing an employee mirror of the key CX metrics. The combination allows you to do some powerful gap analysis and gain insight on root causes. And finally, still on that topic of root causes, I've witnessed enormous value in giving responsibility to cross-functional teams to task them to regularly report back on root cause analysis and data mining into customer issues. And there are many other practices to strengthen that employee-customer line of sight. A whole range of what you might call customer closeness activities. Sky, for example, has developed an app to deliver customer insight stories to senior management using journalistic techniques to achieve cut-through. Top execs look at it every weekend. It's easy to comment and flag articles to others in the organization. And as you can imagine, this quickly drives engagement at a senior level. Also at Sky, Meet the Customer sessions allowed senior executives to witness firsthand the frustrations and emotions of long-term customers who were paying a lot more than newer customers. This type of encounter can have far-reaching effects, and this proved, in the case of Sky, a catalyst for changes in pricing and the VIP rewards program. A recent financial services client I worked with is now building customer closeness into its induction program for new employees. Each employee, starting in their role, whatever the role in fact, is required to call 10 customers and share their feelings and learnings with their colleagues after this. So in this talk, we focused on a fundamental gap in many CX programs, the fact that they just don't sufficiently engage and mobilize the whole workforce. I want to wrap up by recapping on some of the key messages. Capturing your employees' perspective on CX is essential to understanding the customer journey and building the playbooks for great customer experiences. And we believe this concept of building the internal playbooks to deliver on the moments of truth is very powerful. Employees from frontline to back office reveal how internal processes, comms or silos may be blocking CX delivery, all about finding the spanner in the works. Organizations need to inspire and empower their teams to experiment and solve customer pain points themselves. And within this, adopting an agile test and learn approach to CX trials will lead to crafting the right innovations for both customers and employees. The successful change doesn't come about overnight, but step by step. Testing, pausing, reflecting, and then scaling, as we've heard in the examples of T-Mobile and Virgin. So thanks very much for listening. I hope we've provided some stimulating perspectives on how you may be able to better harness the commitment and creativity of the workforce. Wishing you very good luck with your CX efforts. We've shared our details there, as you'll see on the final slide. Please do come back to us and get in touch with any questions or thoughts. We'd really like to hear from you. All the best, and thanks once again for listening.